Forgotten tales and dire warnings. The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Coalition hummed with the quiet conversations of 200 different species. Representative Zintoth of the Arcadian Confederation adjusted his ceremonial robes as he waited for the emergency session to begin. Around him, the most powerful beings in the galaxy settled into their seats, their faces, those that had faces, showing varying degrees of annoyance at being summoned so abruptly. "This had better be important," muttered Delegate Crixus, her crystalline form glittering under the chamber's lights. "I was in the middle of the procession of eternal light." "Something about an archaeological discovery," Zintoth replied, keeping his voice low. Supposedly urgent enough to interrupt the galactic summit. High Chancellor Vraxos, a towering figure with iridescent scales and eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of a dozen civilizations, raised his ceremonial staff. The chamber fell silent. Esteemed members of the coalition, his voice resonated through the vast space. "I present Chief Archaeologist Lumi Taven of the Exploration Corps." A small, slender figure made her way to the central podium. Her pale blue skin contrasted sharply with the deep crimson of her explorer's uniform. Unlike the others, she wore no ornaments, no symbols of status, just the practical attire of someone who spent their life digging through the ruins of dead worlds. "Speak, archaeologist. What discovery warrants such urgency?" Chancellor Vraxos asked, impatience evident in his tone. Lumi activated the holographic display, and a three-dimensional image of a device appeared above the chamber floor. It was clearly ancient, a metallic cylinder inscribed with symbols unfamiliar to most present. 3 cycles ago, my team uncovered this beacon on the outer rim world designated XT-479. She began, her voice steady despite the intimidating audience. "It was buried beneath the ruins of what we now believe was an observation post." "And," prompted the Chancellor, "the beacon activated upon excavation, transmitting a message on frequencies unused for millennia. We've only just completed the translation." She tapped her datapad, and the hologram changed to display a string of symbols. "These are human markings," she stated simply. A ripple of laughter spread through the chamber. "Humans," scoffed Delegate Crixus. "You've interrupted the most important diplomatic gathering of the decade because of fairy tales." More laughter followed. Even Chancellor Vraxos allowed himself an amused smile. Zintoth leaned forward, however, his interest piqued. Humans were indeed the stuff of children's stories, a supposedly inventive and tenacious species that had briefly ventured into space before mysteriously disappearing from galactic affairs thousands of years ago. Some legends painted them as brilliant innovators, others as dangerous warmongers, but all agreed they were extinct or had retreated to their homeworld, never to emerge again. "What does this beacon say?" Zintoth asked, silencing the chamber with his uncharacteristic interest. Lumi's expression remained grave. "It's a warning. It says, 'We watched, we remembered, we return.'" The laughter resumed, louder this time. "So a mythical species left a message promising to return." Chancellor Vraxos chuckled. "Perhaps they'll arrive on wings of fire, as the old tales suggest." "Chancellor," Lumi persisted, "the beacon also contained coordinates. They matched the location of an energy surge detected at the edge of Coalition space 3 days ago." The amusement in the chamber dimmed slightly. "What kind of energy surge?" asked a delegate from the back. "Unknown," Lumi replied. "Our sensors couldn't classify it. But it was massive, enough to distort subspace for several light years in all directions." Chancellor Vraxos waved a dismissive hand. "Probably a natural phenomenon. The outer regions are full of cosmic anomalies." "The surge recurred yesterday," Lumi countered, "and again this morning. Each time, closer to Coalition space." This information stirred murmurs of concern. Natural phenomena rarely followed patterns of approach. "Show us," demanded Zintoth. The hologram shifted again, displaying a star map. 3 points of light pulsed in sequence, forming a clear trajectory toward the heart of Coalition territory. I've cross-referenced the design of the beacon with archaeological records, Lumi continued. It matches fragments found on 17 different worlds across the galaxy, all sites where ancient civilizations suddenly collapsed without explanation. The chamber had grown quiet now, the earlier mockery fading into an uneasy silence. What exactly are you suggesting, archaeologist? Chancellor Vraxos asked, his voice noticeably less dismissive. I'm suggesting, Chancellor, that the myths about humans might not be as fictional as we've believed. And if the warning is genuine, something is coming our way. Admiral Paxforan stared at the sensor readings, his tentacles twitching with frustration. The Coalition scout ship Vigilant Explorer had been monitoring the anomaly for 12 hours now, and they were no closer to understanding it. Anything new, Science Officer? He asked. Officer Telex adjusted her sensory apparatus, the delicate instruments embedded in what passed for her face humming softly. The energy pattern defies our classification systems, Admiral. It's like nothing recorded in our databases. Is it a weapon? Unknown. It doesn't match any weapon signature we've ever encountered. But, she hesitated. Speak freely, officer. The pattern isn't random. There's intelligence behind it. A design. I'd almost say it's communicating. Admiral Voran frowned. In his 3 centuries of service to the Coalition fleet, he'd encountered many mysteries of space, but few that seemed deliberately engineered to confound their most advanced sensors. Send another probe, he ordered. Maximum scanner resolution. As the probe launched toward the swirling distortion ahead, Communications Officer Jex suddenly straightened at his console. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission. It's coming from inside the anomaly. On screen, Voran commanded. The main view screen flickered, distorted, then resolved into a strange symbol, a circle with 2 perpendicular lines intersecting it, surrounded by smaller markings. What is that? Voran demanded. Officer Telex worked frantically at her station, running it through the historical database. Match found. It appears to be an ancient human military insignia. A chill ran through the bridge. Like everyone else, Voran had grown up with tales of humans, unpredictable, innovative, dangerous. But they were myths, nothing more. Impossible, he said flatly. Humans are legends, stories to frighten hatchlings. The transmission continues, Admiral, Jex reported. Audio only. Let's hear it. A voice emerged from the speakers, strange, fluid, unlike any language currently spoken in the Coalition. Yet somehow, the universal translators processed it perfectly. This is Captain Eleanor Chen of the... Voran stared at the screen, at the impossible ships that had surrounded his vessel without firing a shot, at the confirmation of what children's stories had always warned. Humans were real, and they had returned. The myths were true, he whispered. The main vessel's communication system activated again. Admiral Voran of the Coalition, you will carry our message. The human race has awakened from its long vigil. We have watched as your coalition built its empire on the ashes of our allies. We have counted your violations of the boundaries we established. We have mourned the civilizations you have consumed in your expansion. A pause, heavy with meaning. The reckoning is at hand. Chancellor Vraxos had never felt fear in his long life. Not true fear. But as he watched the recording from the Vigilant Explorer for the 3rd time, he felt it now, coiling in his gut like a living thing. How many ships? He asked, his voice barely audible. At least 500 confirmed, replied Fleet Commander Zor, and our long-range sensors indicate more arriving by the hour. The emergency session of the Coalition High Command had been convened within minutes of the Vigilant Explorer's return. Admiral Voran had been escorted directly to the chamber, still visibly shaken from his encounter. They could have destroyed us, Voran was saying. They had us completely at their mercy. Instead, they scanned us thoroughly, downloaded our entire database, then sent us back with their message. Archaeologist Lumi stood quietly in the corner, her earlier vindication bringing her no joy. The beacons were warnings, Boundary markers. They've been there for thousands of years, and we've been dismantling them as curious artifacts. What do they want? Demanded Crixus. If these truly are the humans of legend, why return now, after all this time? The message mentioned allies, Zintoth observed. Civilizations we supposedly consumed. An uncomfortable silence fell over the chamber as the implications sank in. The Coalition's expansion had been aggressive over the millennia, absorbing or subjugating dozens of younger civilizations in its path. It was the way of the galaxy. The strong subsumed the weak. We need to respond with overwhelming force, Fleet Commander Zor declared. If these humans have been hiding all this time, they can't possibly match our military might. The Coalition commands the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Several delegates nodded in agreement, their initial fear giving way to familiar arrogance. They surprised us once, Zor continued. It won't happen again. I propose we gather the combined fleet at the Krell Nexus and launch a preemptive strike. And if they truly are the humans of legend, Lumi asked quietly. The stories speak of their tenacity, their resourcefulness, and their vengeance. Chancellor Vraxos stroked his scaled chin thoughtfully. Legends grow in the telling, archaeologist. Even if these are indeed humans returned from some self-imposed exile, they are one species facing the combined might of 200. The Coalition has never known defeat, agreed Crixus. Lumi shook her head. Neither had the Zethkar Empire, according to the historical records. Yet they vanished overnight, 12,000 years ago. Their final transmissions mentioned the human response to some unspecified provocation. Before anyone could respond, a junior communications officer burst into the chamber, protocol forgotten in his haste. Chancellor, urgent news from the outer systems. A Coalition colony world, New Dawn, has gone silent. All communications ceased 1 hour ago. The humans, Vraxos asked sharply. Unknown, Chancellor, but the last transmission received contained only 4 words. They walk like death. The chamber erupted in chaotic discussion. New Dawn was a wealthy agricultural world, home to billions of Coalition citizens. Its sudden silence could not be coincidence. Enough. Chancellor Vraxos thundered, bringing order. We are the Galactic Coalition. We have ruled the stars for 50,000 years. We will not be intimidated by the return of a species from children's tales. He turned to Fleet Commander Zor. Assemble the combined fleet as you suggested. Every available warship. We will meet this threat with the full might of the Coalition. As the chamber emptied, delegates rushing to secure their own interests, Lumi approached Admiral Vorin, who stood silent and pale. You saw their ship up close, she said softly. Do you believe the Chancellor's confidence is warranted? Vorin's eyes met hers, haunted. When I was in their presence, I felt small, like a primitive facing something beyond comprehension. Their technology, their demeanor, it was like they were studying insects, not contacting equals. He shuddered slightly. The combined fleet is formidable, yes, but I fear we may be marching to our own annihilation. And the worst part? Lumi asked. The worst part is that I believe they want us to fight. They're counting on it. The reckoning. The combined fleet of the Galactic Coalition was a sight to behold. 10,000 warships arranged in perfect battle formation, their gleaming hulls reflecting the light of the Krell Nexus star. It was the greatest concentration of military might the galaxy had ever witnessed, drawn from every corner of Coalition space. Fleet Commander Zor stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Inevitable Victory, his 4 arms folded behind his back as he surveyed the tactical display. Each ship represented thousands of crew members, the finest technology, centuries of military tradition. Surely no force in the universe could stand against such power. Final fleet coordination complete, Commander, reported his executive officer. All vessels report combat readiness. Zor nodded in satisfaction. And the human vessels? Maintaining position at the edge of the barren zone. Their numbers have increased to approximately 700 ships, but they've made no aggressive movements. Their restraint will not save them, Zor declared. The Coalition Council has decreed their presence a threat to galactic stability. Today, we will remind the galaxy why the Coalition has ruled unopposed for 50 millennia. As the fleet prepared for its advance, a junior communications officer approached nervously. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the human flagship." Zor's expression hardened. "Put it through. Let's hear what they have to say before we reduce them to cosmic dust." The main view screen activated, revealing the human female. She appeared unremarkable by Coalition standards. 2 arms, bipedal, soft features with no natural armaments. Yet something in her eyes gave Zor pause, a depth of knowing that seemed out of place in such a fragile-looking being. "Fleet Commander," she began, her translated voice calm and measured. "I am Grand Admiral Eleanor Chen of the Earth Reclamation Fleet. I offer you one final opportunity to stand down your forces and prepare for diplomatic contact." Zor allowed himself a small, contemptuous smile. "You are outnumbered more than 10 to 1 human. Your species is nothing but a footnote in galactic history. You will surrender your vessels for examination and your crew for interrogation, or be destroyed." The human showed no reaction to the threat. "You misunderstand our position, Commander. We are not here to fight your fleet. We are here to execute justice for crimes committed against our allies over thousands of years." "The Coalition answers to no one," Zor replied coldly. "Especially not to myths returned from the void. You still think us myths." A hint of sadness crossed the human's face. "Then perhaps a demonstration is in order." The transmission ended abruptly. Moments later, alarms blared across the bridge. "Commander," shouted the sensor officer. "Energy spike detected from the human vessels. Prepare to engage," Zor ordered. "All ships, battle positions." But the expected attack never came. Instead, space itself seemed to ripple around the human fleet. For a moment, reality distorted, as if the fabric of the universe was being manipulated by invisible hands. Then, silence. "Report," Zor demanded. "The human fleet, it's gone, Commander," stammered the sensor officer. "No trace, no warp signatures, nothing." Zor's confidence faltered for the first time. "Impossible. 10,000 ships can't have lost them. Expand scan range." Before the order could be carried out, new alarms sounded, this time from within the Coalition formation. "Multiple contacts, inside our defensive perimeter." The tactical display transformed into chaos as human vessels appeared throughout the Coalition fleet, not at the edges, but directly among them, as if they had always been there. The impossible maneuver shattered the carefully arranged formation, leaving Coalition ships scrambling to avoid collisions. "How?" Zor whispered, watching as his perfect battle plan disintegrated in seconds. The answer came not from his crew, but from the reappearance of Admiral Chen on the view screen. "Displacement technology," she explained, as calmly as if discussing the weather. "We bend space rather than traveling through it. Your sensors cannot track what moves between the dimensions you perceive." Around them, the human ships hovered in perfect formation, now interspersed throughout the Coalition fleet like wolves among sheep. They had not fired a single shot, yet they had already achieved tactical superiority. "This is your final warning," Chen continued. "Power down your weapons systems and prepare to receive our representatives." Zor's pride overwhelmed his judgment. "Coalition fleet, open fire. All weapons, all targets." 10,000 ships unleashed their arsenal simultaneously, filling space with energy beams, plasma torpedoes, and graviton pulses. The firepower directed at the human vessels could have shattered planets. Yet when the barrage subsided, the human ships remained untouched, surrounding by shimmering fields that seemed to absorb rather than deflect the attacks. "As expected," Admiral Chen said, her voice tinged with genuine regret. "You leave us no choice." The human vessels pulsed once in perfect synchronization. There was no visible weapon discharge, no energy beam, No explosive force, just a ripple of something that passed through every coalition ship simultaneously. On the bridge of the inevitable victory, Zor watched in horror as every system shut down at once. Lights, engines, weapons, life support, all dead in an instant. "Emergency power," he shouted, but nothing responded. The mighty dreadnought had been transformed into a lifeless hulk. Throughout the fleet, 10,000 ships drifted powerless, their crews trapped inside as the life support systems slowly failed. The view screen flickered back to life, powered somehow by the humans themselves. "We have neutralized your fleet without destroying it," Admiral Chen informed him. "Your vessels have been rendered temporarily inoperable, but your crews will survive if you cooperate." This technology was developed 15,000 years ago, during humanity's first age of expansion. It is considered primitive by our current standards. Zor could only stare, his worldview crumbling around him. "You will be towed to the nearest habitable system," Chen continued. "There, representatives from the civilizations you have wronged will determine your fate." What are you?" Zor managed to ask. For the first time, something like compassion showed in the human's eyes. "We are the caretakers you failed to be." On the observation deck of her flagship, the Reclamation, Eleanor Chen watched as coalition ships were systematically disabled and prepared for transport. After 15,000 years of waiting, of watching, of gathering evidence, the day of reckoning had finally arrived. Footsteps behind her announced the arrival of her second-in-command, Julian Reyes. "Phase 1 complete, Admiral," he reported. "All coalition vessels neutralized. No casualties on either side. And the coalition homeworlds. Our diplomatic teams are making contact now. As expected, there's confusion and resistance, but the demonstration here has been transmitted throughout their networks. They understand the futility of further military response." Eleanor nodded, her gaze still fixed on the crippled coalition fleet. "And our allies, the representatives of the Zethkar, the Lumini, and the other surviving species are ready to emerge from sanctuary. The habitats are being prepared for their return to their ancestral worlds." She turned to face him, her expression solemn. 15 millennia, Julian. 15 millennia since we realized what was happening. Since we made the hardest choice in human history." Julian nodded, understanding the weight of her words. The choice to withdraw from the galactic stage, to become myth rather than conquerors, to prepare in secret while watching their allies suffer, it had not been made lightly. "The coalition wouldn't listen," he reminded her gently. "We tried diplomacy first. They saw our warnings as weakness, as they did with every peaceful species they encountered." Eleanor's voice hardened. "They mistook gentleness for frailty, wisdom for indecision, and they paid for that mistake with their empire." She activated a display, showing the status of the ongoing operation across coalition space. Hundreds of human ships had emerged simultaneously throughout the galaxy, neutralizing military installations, freeing subjugated worlds, dismantling the power structures built on millennia of conquest. "The sanctuary fleets are launching," Julian reported. "The rescued populations can begin returning to their ancestral homeworlds within days." Humanity's greatest achievement, and its most closely guarded secret, had been the massive sanctuary habitats hidden between dimensions, where they had preserved millions of individuals from species targeted for absorption by the coalition. For 15,000 years, these refugees had lived alongside humanity, contributing their knowledge, their perspective, their hope for eventual justice. "Admiral," called a communications officer. "We're receiving a transmission from Earth Command. It's the Council. Put them through." The display shifted to show 5 elderly humans seated at a circular table, the Earth Reclamation Council, the guiding force behind humanity's longest and most complex operation. "Admiral Chen," spoke the chairwoman, her voice carrying the weight of centuries despite her human lifespan. "The reports are confirmed. Phase 1 is successful across all sectors. The Coalition's military capability has been neutralized. Yes, Madam Chairwoman. We are proceeding to Phase 2, the liberation of subjugated worlds, and the return of sanctuary populations. And the coalition leadership, they will face justice administered by representatives of those they wronged. As agreed, we will serve as peacekeepers, not judges. The chairwoman nodded approvingly. After 15,000 years of preparation, it is gratifying to see justice finally being served. Our ancestors made a solemn vow when they witnessed the first atrocities that humanity would not allow such predation to continue unchecked. The price was high, Eleanor acknowledged. Becoming myths, withdrawing from the galaxy, dedicating our entire civilization to this cause. A price willingly paid, countered another council member. Remember, Admiral, we did not withdraw out of fear or weakness. We withdrew to prepare, to develop the technologies we would need, to build the sanctuaries that would preserve what the Coalition sought to destroy. Eleanor nodded. The decision had been made long before her birth, but every human knew the story. How the early Earth explorers had witnessed the Coalition's brutality, how they had tried and failed to intervene diplomatically, how they had then made the fateful choice to fade into legend while working toward this day. The Coalition representatives are requesting a formal audience, Julian reported. Granted, Eleanor replied. It's time they learned the truth. Chancellor Vraxos had never imagined he would stand as a supplicant before any power in the galaxy. Yet here he was, aboard a human vessel, surrounded by the technology of a civilization that had revealed itself to be not extinct, not primitive, but simply waiting. You still don't understand, Admiral Chen was saying, her tone not unkind but firm. We withdrew from galactic affairs 15,000 years ago, not because we were weak, but because we saw what was coming. The Coalition's pattern of conquest and absorption was clear even then. But to vanish completely, to become nothing more than children's tales, Vraxos couldn't comprehend it. That was by design, explained another human, introduced as historian Reyes. We needed time. Time to develop the technologies necessary to oppose you without destruction. Time to build the sanctuaries that would preserve the species you targeted. The display behind them activated, showing massive structures floating in some unrecognizable space. Artificial worlds the size of small moons. While your coalition expanded through conquest, humanity expanded through dimension-shifting technology. Rice continued. We created spaces between spaces where we could build, develop, and shelter those who escaped your absorption. Impossible, whispered Vraxos. No species could develop such technology in secret. Not in secret, Chen corrected. In plain sight. Those anomalies your scientists could never quite explain. The mysterious disappearances of ships at the galaxy's edge. The strange energy signatures your sensors detected but couldn't classify. All us, operating in dimensions adjacent to your perception. Vraxos felt a cold realization spreading through him. The beacons were warnings, yes, placed at the boundaries of protected space. Each time your coalition expanded beyond those markers, we documented the violation. Each time you dismantled a beacon, we noted it as deliberate disregard for the boundaries we had established. But why wait so long to act? Demanded Crixus, who stood beside Vraxos. If you had this power, why allow the suffering to continue? For the first time, genuine anger flashed in Chen's eyes. Do not speak to us of allowing suffering. We saved what we could, who we could. We developed our capabilities not to conquer but to preserve. And we waited because true justice required more than simply destroying you. It required creating the conditions for restoration. The display changed again, showing ships departing from the sanctuary habitats, ships carrying the survivors and descendants of species long thought extinct. The Zethkar Empire you allegedly defeated 12,000 years ago. Their civilization continues. The Lumini philosophers whose homeworld you strip-mined, they'd preserved their knowledge. The Vish-Ari artists whose culture you absorbed and commodified, they still sing their ancient songs. Vraxos staggered slightly, overwhelmed by the implications. What? What happens now? Now. Chen's expression softened slightly. Now the reckoning begins, not with destruction, but with restoration. The peoples you wronged will return to their ancestral homes. The resources you plundered will be accounted for. The true history will be recorded and acknowledged. And the coalition will continue, but transformed. The age of conquest is over. The age of cooperation begins. Genuine cooperation, not absorption disguised as alliance. She gestured to another display, showing human ships positioned throughout coalition space, not as conquerors, but as peacekeepers. We will remain until the transition is complete, until the new balance is established, not as rulers, but as guarantors of justice. Historian Reyes stepped forward. Consider, Chancellor, the patience required for this moment. For 15 millennia, humanity resisted the temptation to strike prematurely. We developed technologies that could have destroyed your coalition 1,000 times over, yet we chose a path that preserved life rather than extinguished it. Why? Vraxos asked, genuinely bewildered by such restraint. Because, Admiral Chen replied simply, destroying you would have made us no different from you. Our victory isn't measured in ships destroyed or worlds conquered, but in civilizations preserved and justice served. As Vraxos absorbed these words, a new transmission appeared, a face unlike any in the coalition. It took him moments to recognize the distinctive features of a Zethkar noble, a species supposedly extinct for 12 millennia. Chancellor Vraxos, the Zethkar spoke, its voice melodious despite the gravity of the moment. I am Sovereign Protector Xanzol, descendant of those who fled your ancestors' conquest. The time has come for us to reclaim our place in the galaxy, not through vengeance, but through restoration. Other faces appeared, representatives of a dozen species the coalition had absorbed over the millennia. Not extinct, not forgotten, but preserved by humanity's secret intervention. This is the truth your coalition sought to erase, Admiral Chen said quietly. These are the voices your history silenced, and this is the new reality you must now accept. Outside the viewport, coalition ships drifted powerless, surrounded by human vessels that had neutralized them without destruction. Throughout the galaxy, the pattern repeated, not a war of annihilation, but a systematic dismantling of an empire built on conquest. You mocked our legends, Chen concluded, her gaze steady. You laughed at the warnings. You dismissed the boundaries we established. And now, the myths have returned, not to destroy, but to rebuild what you sought to erase. For the first time in his long life, Chancellor Vraxos truly understood fear, not of destruction, but of judgment. The humans had not returned as conquerors. They had returned as witnesses, carrying with them the living proof of every crime the coalition had committed in its long history. And as he looked into the eyes of those his civilization had wronged, he realized that the greatest punishment was not death or defeat, but having to face the truth of what they had become. The human warships had indeed darkened their skies, not to end their story, but to begin a new and more just chapter in the galaxy's long history. In the observation lounge of the Reclamation, Eleanor Chen watched as the first sanctuary ships descended to the surface of New Zethkar, once the homeworld of a proud civilization, then a coalition colony world, and now the site of a historic return. 15,000 years, she murmured, from myths to reckoning. Was it worth the wait? Asked Julian, standing beside her. Eleanor considered the question as she watched families setting foot on their ancestral soil for the first time in countless generations. The patience of humanity, the long vigil, the careful planning across centuries, all for this moment. Yes, she said finally, some forms of justice can't be rushed. Below, the returning Zethkar were greeted by the descendants of those who had remained behind and survived under coalition rule. Two branches of the same species, separated by time and space, reunited at last. And now, Julian asked, once the restoration is complete, what becomes of humanity's role in the galaxy? Eleanor smiled. a genuine expression of hope after so long focused on a single mission. Now we can finally stop being myths and start being neighbors. The age of hiding is over. The age of cooperation begins. As if to punctuate her words, the first sunrise on New Zethkar broke over the horizon, bathing the reunification in golden light. The long night had ended. A new day had dawned. And this time, humanity would not watch from the shadows.